Touchdown, Pittsburgh!
Touchdown, Washington!
What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to a brand new episode of the Steelskin Show, a show hosted by one diehard Pittsburgh Steelers fan and one diehard Washington Redskins fan. From game recaps, game previews, news headlines, analysis, opinions, and all kinds of other stuff. We've got you covered on all things Pittsburgh Steelers and Washington Redskins. My name is Patrick, and I'm the voice of the Pittsburgh Steelers.
I'm Chris, the voice of the Washington Redskins.
Chris, what's up, buddy?
Hey, man.
How are you doing?
Good. Good.
Back. Chris is back off of IR, everybody. Put on IR a couple weeks ago, but he has been activated back onto the roster today. How you feeling, man?
Better. A lot better.
Dude, you got some love in the comments from the YouTube comments, dude.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate it. You don't know how important your back is until you
heard
can't
it.
use it.
Yeah. It's one of those things, man, that everything hurts.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Everything.
every action. Yep.
Now, are you of sound mind tonight, or are you under the influence of any painkillers?
No, I'm not.
You're not under the influence.
I'm not.
I was kind of hoping you were.
I'm drug-free.
Oh, man. Chris, continuing on with our roster evaluations. Last time we did the show, we did defensive backs. Today we're going to hit inside line. We kind of have a big show tonight. That way we can try to get done with this when training camp starts. We're doing inside linebackers, outside linebackers, and we're going to hit our defensive line as well. But before we get into it tonight, very briefly, here to start the show, Chris, do we want to say a word or two about the upcoming July 17th deadline? Obviously, it is the date for any team who has got a player under the franchise tag right now. This is the deadline they have to get a long-term deal done, or else they will just play under their franchise tag. And that's important for us because we have two players who really are kind of the talk of the offseason, Le'Veon Bell and Kirk Cousins, guys who both have the franchise tag. So we'll start with you. Chris, I know you're sick of this. I know every Redskin fan is sick of this at this point, but what's going on, dude? What do you think?
Well, I don't think anything's going on. I think he'll play under the tag. I've thought that since he signed it back when they first franchised him. But there were a couple of reports today. Ian Rappaport said it looks like both sides are comfortable with him playing on under the tag. And look, I mean, nothing's changed. I don't think the Redskins have mentally grasped what's going on here. I think they've just made a dog's breakfast out of this whole thing, and it started last year, and this is why we're here, is their failure to get a deal done last year has put them in a position to where Kirk Cousins doesn't have to have a deal to get paid. He's getting paid.
Yeah, but I mean, what does this mean? And obviously maybe it's too early to talk about this, but what's this mean for next year?
I think he plays on the transition tag.
Do you think he walks next year?
No, I mean, if the Redskins transition him, the situation then would turn to a team would be free to offer him a contract, and Kirk could sign an offer sheet, but the Redskins have 7 days to match that.
But do you think they will? Because, look, the franchise tag for Kirk next season is going to be something.
The franchise is 34. The transition is 28.8. Who knows? I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's insane that we're here in this situation.
So to be clear, you think 0% chance?
No, I don't know. No, I don't. I don't think there's any reason for Kirk. See, here's the thing. There's no reason for Kirk to do this. The Redskins. The only way this deal gets done is if the Redskins offer him a contract that is at least as attractive as him hitting the open market.
Yeah,
that's the whole thing. And a competent starting NFL quarterback has not hit the market in terms of being a free agent in my lifetime. I mean, I have to think back to Scott Mitchell of the Miami Dolphins, started a couple of games and broke the bank when he signed with the Lions. But largely, quarterbacks get locked up and stayed locked up once you prove you can do it. So
this is the Redskins we're talking about.
Exactly. So the idea that the Redskins could get this deal done, the only way they get it done is if they make an offer that at least matches expectation-wise what Cousins and Mike McCartney see as their fair market value.
Well, really briefly, let's talk about Derek Carr. How much did the Derek Carr contract
It didn't affect Cousins at all.
You don't think so?
I think if anything, it was just a floor.
Okay.
It was just a floor. I never felt like that deal was going to move the needle because Kurt's already making 24, and
was Carr making 25?
Yeah, 25. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. I mean, if Carr had come in there with a $26 or $27 million deal, then I'd have said, okay, maybe that jumpstarts things.
Okay. See, I just wasn't sure if that stalled things.
When he stayed around 25, when he stayed around 24, 25 million a year.
There's no reason for the Redskins to
I
jump.
don't think there's any reason for Kirk to jump.
Okay.
See, that's the thing. The Redskins have no leverage in this thing. Cousins has all the leverage, and anyway, we've beat the horse to death and have started rebeating him. So
yeah, and I follow quite a few Redskins fans on Twitter. You know, they said it. Jim Nantz even came out and said it a couple weeks back. We're all sick of this.
We're fatigued. I mean, yes, we'd all love to see Kirk in a long-term contract. It's not going to happen. He'll play this year on a tag, and we'll see what kind of circus starts next year.
Okay.
So, bouncing the ball over in your court. Yeah. How's it going with Le'Veon?
Dead 50-50, man. Dead 50-50.
Now, has he signed the tender?
No, he has still not signed that as well. You know me, Chris, just in our private conversations, I've kind of been a roller coaster ride on this thing because back in Steelskin Show episode 50, I was very confident, very cocky. That deal's going to get done. Everybody calm down. And I felt bad about saying that because I didn't closely look at the situation as I should. As I begin to look at the numbers more, the situation is a very real possibility he does not sign a deal, and he just plays on the franchise tag this season.
And I think that's a win for the Steelers.
No, I disagree.
You disagree?
Big time.
My only thing is I feel like Le'Veon Bell has such an injury history that if the Steelers could play him, get one more year out of him, is that a bad thing?
Okay, well let's break that down for a second. Here is the whole key in these entire negotiations, ladies and gentlemen. The number 12.12. That is the key in this entire, with Le'Veon Bell and the Steelers. That's the whole number. Here's how the Steelers are viewing this situation. They're looking at that number going, Le'Veon, we understand that the franchise tag is the floor. And this is how guys like Kirk Cousins and Le'Veon Bell have broken the franchise tag.
Right,
this is how they have destroyed it. The Steelers are looking at it saying, Bell, we understand that you think this is the baseline, but here's the problem. Your baseline number, you are already $4 million ahead of Shady McCoy, who right now is the highest paid back in the league at $8 million. Adrian Peterson did not sign his tender in Minnesota. He gets released, and now he's with the Saints.
All right, let me ask you this, though.
So you see what I'm trying to say?
Right, and we talked about this earlier.
Yes.
Would the Steelers view this as, all right, we're just going to tag and hold you, and you'll take less to get a long-term deal?
Yes.
And I feel like this is where players are beginning to be smart and saying,
smart.
You know what? If you say I'm worth 12, that's the starting point.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't blame Le'Veon for that.
No, and this is the Le'Veon Bell situation, folks, is honestly one of the most unique situations I've seen. Because usually in these contract negotiations between players and teams, one side's got their head on straight and the other one's just somewhere out in left field. Both the Steelers and Bell are very logical. The Steelers, I understand them looking at Bell saying that. Not to mention injury history, running backs. The running back market continually is doing what? Going down. It's also a very unpredictable market. So the Steelers are looking at this going, Bell, we cannot go higher than 12. We can't go much higher.
Now, is he wanting more than 12?
That's the floor for Le'Veon Bell. 12, and this is where we get into what Le'Veon Bell is thinking about the number 12.12. The number 12.12 to Le'Veon Bell is where the negotiations start. We're not talking about roster bonus and signing bonus. We're talking about that's the base salary, then we talk roster bonus and signing bonus. And for Bell, just like you just said, I understand. Here is a guy who plays a position that has a shorter lifespan. He's more injury prone. Of course he might want to maximize. Of course.
Oh, yeah.
So I think both sides have got their heads on straight and they have understandable positions. And here's where we get into the second part of this. I don't know how much incentive there is for Le'Veon Bell to sign a long-term deal. Because here's the reality. He will gladly play on a one-year deal that pays him $12.12 million.
Right.
If the Steelers, assuming he has a clean season, doesn't get injured, rushes for another 1,400 yards, has 800 or 1,000 reception yards, let's just say we come to next season. Guess what the franchise tag goes to next season if the Steelers decide to do it? $14 million.
Yeah.
Le'Veon Bell could be sitting back going, I can make $27 million in 2 years. Why would I sign a long-term deal? You see what I'm trying to say?
Oh, listen, he's playing it like Kirk.
Yes.
He's
And
playing like Kirk.
I would guarantee you Bell's agent has been very closely watching the Kirk situation.
Listen, I think it's the smart play because, again, when the franchise tag was instituted, it was a way for teams to hold on to their best player. And for years, it was just I've always just called it a tag and hold.
Yeah.
And then it's almost like the franchise tag was, whatever the money was or whatever the number value of the franchise was at that point was thrown out the window.
That was irrelevant. Yeah.
Let's just work on a long-term deal, and everybody seemed to be okay with that.
Not anymore.
But I think it's smart business for these players to say, you know what, you want to tag me, that's great, but you've just created a floor.
Yes.
And this
we
is
can
where
go
we're going
higher
from here.
We can go higher than that.
So
But
I think you're right. I think the Steelers are thinking about it logically, and I think Bell's thinking about it logically. But what happens, at what point does Le'Veon have to sign the tender? I mean, where's the mechanism? I mean, there's a point where he's going to have to miss the first 10 games of the season, right? If he hasn't signed
hasn't signed the tender, which, by the way, it will not come to that because Bell already confirmed that he will play on a one-year deal if it comes to that. Okay. He already said, I'll be glad to do that. Now, Le'Veon Bell in the past also, I think it was back in March or April in a TMZ interview, he talked about the good things about a long-term deal. He talked about the security of a long-term deal. At the end of the day, here's what you want if you're a Steelers fan. You better hope and pray he signs a long-term deal. Here's why. I am not convinced, Chris, the Steelers are going to pay him $14 million next year. That is a lot of money to pay a running back.
I think you're really getting into the numbers there. Don't make sense.
Not only that, but the Steelers have got to get a contract done for Alejandro Villanueva, Stephon Tuitt. Oh, hey, and Ryan Shazier. We got to have a conversation about him at some point.
Yeah.
So Bell's going to be a Steeler this season. All I'm trying to say, guys, is if a long-term deal does not get done by Monday at 4 o'clock, you need to be afraid. We get into very muddy waters.
I mean, and here's the thing. Now in the NFL, most long-term deals, quote-unquote, are basically 2-year deals. Most of that money...
The guaranteed money. And then teams after 2 years can generally get out of it. That's an excellent point. And this is why it might make more sense. I would guarantee you Bell's agent... By the way, Dave Bryan of Steelers Depot wrote a great article on this the other day. He said Bell's agent is trying to get him about $27 million in the first 2 seasons.
Right. I mean, that's kind of the whole thing. It's like this David Carr is a 2-year, $47.5 million contract, essentially.
Yes. And then when you look at what he'll play under with the franchise tag and next season, it goes $27 million.
That's right.
So this is why I say I don't know how much incentive there is for Bell to get a long-term deal done. I think he might like the security of it, but at the same time, if you're a guy just trying to maximize the earnings, you'll just play on that tag. Absolutely, you'll do that. But anyway, so that's kind of where we stand with those. We got till Monday, man. Monday at 4 o'clock.
Yep.
So
here we go.
All right. You want to get down to it?
Let's do it.
All right, Chris. Well, you want to start? Where do you want to start today? Me? You? We'll start with me?
Yeah, we'll start with you.
Let's start with me. Let's do it. So we're doing inside linebackers, outside linebackers, and defensive linemen today. We'll start with inside linebackers today. In a lot of ways, we kind of are in uncharted territory this season when it comes to our inside linebacker situation, and that really starts with the loss of our 10-year inside linebacker, Lawrence Timmons. We talked about it here on the show. You know, we paid him homage. We thanked him. But, Chris, I don't think it's really hit me yet that Lawrence Timmons is not going to be in a Steelers uniform.
Right.
I mean, it's going to be so weird not seeing 94 out there in that football field, man. But be that as it may, I am very confident about the guy who's going to be coming in for him, his successor. And that's our first guy we'll talk about is Vince Williams. Vince Williams very easily could be the biggest winner in the Steelers draft because the Steelers, not only did they lose Lawrence Timmons, they then did not go out and draft an inside linebacker.
Right.
Vince Williams, he won. That dude won the NFL draft for the Steelers, that is.
Yep.
And I know a lot of you are, look, I'm just as sad as you guys about the loss of Lawrence Timmons. I know a lot of you felt like we needed to draft an inside linebacker, but guys, you need to be excited about Vince Williams. Ever since this guy has been on the team since 2013 when he was drafted, he has done nothing but be quiet, be humble, and work his tail off. And time again, whether it's been in camp or practice or preseason, or even the times he has gotten opportunities to get on the field and get some snaps, this guy's proved himself over and over and over again, but he's never gotten the opportunity to be a starter because of where he is on the roster, because of the guys that are in front of him. He's a guy I felt bad for, because for so many years, we all know that he's good.
Right.
We all know that this guy is very capable, but he just hasn't been able to get on the field. But now, this is his chance. And you need to be excited about him. This moment does not need to be taken from him. He's earned this. He's worked for this. And look, guys, I know it's going to be tough, getting over the loss of Timmons, but Vince Williams has more than enough proved to be a very capable downhill rusher, good at getting after the run, plugging gaps. The only area where I can think of where Williams has shown struggle is stepping out and covering, and that isn't, if you're an inside linebacker, you're going to have to step out into coverage from time to time. That's an area where he has shown a little bit of weakness. But, guys, I'm sad about the loss of Timmons, but I'm excited about Vince Williams. If there is a game that I will point you to that is the metric for Vince Williams, it was last season against the Kansas City Chiefs, Week 4. The dude in one game had 14 tackles, 2 sacks, and a forced fumble. And I already like Vince Williams, but that was the game for me where I said, yeah, he's going to do just fine.
Right.
But he's an automatic lock to make the team, and I'm excited about him. And for all of you out there doubting him, I don't think you need to. I think he's going to be just fine. Next guy on the list is Ryan Shazier. Really not much of a discussion to have about this guy. He is your starter alongside Vince Williams, solidified himself last year as easily one of the best inside linebackers in football when he's healthy. And that's the thing you say about Ryan Shazier, is that when he's healthy, when he's on the field, the guy is near unstoppable at times. And he's one of the guys on this defense who I think can be a Defensive Player of the Year candidate.
Yep.
He's that
he's
good.
got that talent.
Yeah, he does. Made his first Pro Bowl last year. There's just nowhere to go but up for a guy like Ryan Shazier. Next guy on the list, my boy Tyler Matakevich. Chris, we talk about Vince Williams being a guy who won the NFL draft in terms of, a non-draft pick, and then Lawrence Timmons leaves. But I'll tell you another guy who benefited was Tyler Matakevich. Because you think about where Matakevich has gone coming into the season, Chris. Made the 53-man roster last season. That was great and all. But he has now gone from the bottom of the depth chart to the number 3 inside linebacker in the course of one season. Because of all the things that have happened, that's where he is now. So basically, folks, if something happens to Vince Williams or Ryan Shazier, hope to God that something doesn't happen. But I'm just saying, if one of those guys gets injured, Chris, Tyler Matakevich is on the field.
Yeah.
And that's exciting because, I think I speak for probably every Steelers fan out there. We were all just rooting for this guy. 7th-round draft pick last year.
Yeah, he's a thumper.
Yeah, and it's so exciting now because he's right there. He really, really does have a chance to get on the field and get some snaps. And I'm excited about that because last year led the Steelers in special teams tackles, and that was the big thing we drafted him for. Just the guy, it seemed like he was always around the football, always the guy making the tackle. So I think he's an automatic lock to make the team. I don't think there's any discussion there. Probably should have started off with this. Getting down to the number 4 and the number 5 spots. This is where I think the waters begin to get a little bit muddy. I think the Steelers are going to keep 4 inside linebackers. Is it possible that they keep 5? Yes, that is very, very possible. And the Steelers might want to do that because they didn't draft an inside linebacker. Maybe they want to keep 5 for extra security. But in my opinion, I think they're keeping 4. So let's just assume that I'm right, and let's talk about this number 4 spot. Where the battle is going to be here is between Steven Johnson and L.J. Fort. Johnson, I think, is the clear favorite over Fort, assuming they're keeping 4 inside linebackers. Because if they're keeping 5, Fort's on the team too. But if they're going to keep 4, Steven Johnson, I think, is the favorite. And the reason why, the guy is an absolute thumper on special teams. And that was why we picked him up in free agency last season from Tennessee. The guy is an absolute stud on special teams. And look, I don't think it was a coincidence that in that first matchup against the Ravens when Steven Johnson broke his foot and got put on IR, I don't think it was a coincidence that you saw a dramatic dip in our special teams play.
Right.
I really don't think that was a coincidence. This guy, he was amazing on special teams. And I think when he left, that's when you began to see the special teams play go down. So that works very well in Steven Johnson's favor. LJ Fort, on the other hand, I think a lot of people have already counted him out. I think something that works well for Fort is last season, Fort got actual snaps at inside linebacker at times, not Steven Johnson. And I know a lot of people are going to laugh at me for saying this because who in the world would remember this other than a Steelers nerd, but last preseason, the best player on the field for the Steelers was LJ Fort. The guy, I mean, at times just displayed some Ryan Shazier-esque qualities. I like LJ Fort. I've seen enough out of LJ Fort for me to be confident in him. So due to the fact that he gives you a little more with playing actual inside linebacker snaps, I think that could work in his favor if they're going to keep Fort and if they were going to pick one over the other. But ultimately, it's just going to come down to if they're going to keep 4 or 5. If they're keeping 4, there's going to be a battle at that position. If they're keeping 5, they're going to take both of them. Moving now to outside linebackers. Let's go ahead and talk about our first 3 locks to make the team. You've got Bud Dupree, James Harrison, and first-round draft pick TJ Watt. Not a massive discussion to have here. Obviously, Bud Dupree is going to be the starter on one side. His job is not up for grabs, and man, I'm so excited about that guy, man. I mean,
You think he makes the big move this year?
If he plays this season like he all year long, like he did second half of the season last year, easily going over 10 sacks.
Yeah.
Like easily going over 10. There's really no reason why Bud Dupree should not have a massive year. He's another guy who I think, like Ryan Shazier, could be a potential Defensive Player of the Year candidate on this defense if there was going to be one. Very excited about Bud Dupree and what he can do this year. James Harrison and TJ Watt, this is the next little discussion to have. I don't think there's really much of a debate here. Harrison's going to be your starter. He will be your starter. And a lot of people think that TJ Watt could come in and maybe be the starter. No, that's not going to happen. Now, having said that, TJ Watt is going to get a lot of snaps this season. But it's going to be he and Harrison rotating snaps in and out. Now, is it going to be 50-50? Is it going to be 60-40? Is it going to be 70-30? I mean, it's probably too early to tell that.
Right.
It's just going to come down to how well is Harrison playing, how well is Watt playing. But I do think out of all the Steelers rookies, Watt is going to get the most snaps out of all of them. So that's that's what's going on there. Those guys are all locks to make the team. And what I'm about to say is probably going to be in the minority, and I'm probably going to get a little bit of flack in the comments for saying it, but just going to put it out there. And I think I could be right. I think most people have already made it up in their minds that Steelers are keeping 5 outside linebackers, and I agree with that. But it's going to be Arthur Moats and Anthony Chickillo sealed. I am not ready to say that. And we'll start with Arthur Moats. Guys, Arthur Moats is not a lock to make this team. And I know that just by saying that, I've triggered a lot of Steelers fans, because if there's one thing, Chris, that I've learned in the last couple of years, is that you do not say anything bad about Arthur Moats. Don't you dare say anything bad about Arthur Moats. Guys, I want to be very clear. Arthur Moats is easily up there with a guy like Larry Fitzgerald as being one of the classiest guys in pro football. The charity work he does off the field, he helps kids out like crazy, donates his money to this cause and that cause. I think he's working on getting his master's degree right now. I mean, he's an amazing individual. But can we be honest about his football play for a second?
Right.
The guy is right there at solid to subpar. He is a very, very average football player, and he does not give you, outside of being depth and giving you special team snaps, what does Arthur Moats give you?
And don't you feel like if the Steelers viewed him as a starting caliber, James Harrison wouldn't have a job?
That's exactly right. Yes.
I mean,
and Moats was one of those guys who we tried maybe to develop a little bit. Maybe he could be the future at outside linebacker. No, that didn't work out. Has Moats flashed at times? Yeah, there's been some times where he's done some nice things, but he's very inconsistent. His overall pass rush technique is very underwhelming. I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm looking at Arthur Moats going into this season. I'm like, what do you give us? Now, here's another thing that does not work in Arthur Moats' favor, and this is the big kicker here. Chris, you know how much money Arthur Moats is making going into this season?
No.
$2.5 million. You know how much James Harrison's making? $1.75 million. So the other day they wrote an article about how Mike Mitchell was one of the most overpaid players in the league. We can certainly have that discussion, but can we talk about Arthur Moats for a second? Does Arthur Moats deserve $2.5 million going into this season? I don't think so. So I guess what I'm trying to say is when you look at the mediocre to subpar play of Moats and then you look at his contract, guys, I'm not ready to say he's a lock. In no way, shape, or form. A lot of people think that Anthony Chickillo is the guy who could be on the outs other than Arthur Moats. I disagree with that. Chickillo is younger. He has proven to be the better of the two, and he's only making $615,000 this season. So doesn't it make more sense to keep Chickillo around?
Yeah.
Now, I know what you're thinking. Okay, well, if we're going to get rid of Moats, who replaces him? 7th-round draft pick Keon Adams. A lot of you out there have already thrown him on the practice squad. He's a 7th-round draft pick. He's not going to make the team. This guy's not a slouch. I've taken the time to study him over the last couple of days, watch his tape at Western Michigan. This guy's got some good tape. I mean, this guy I really, really think has got a lot of good things about him. I'd like to see him get a little bigger. He obviously is a 7th-round guy, so there is a lot of development there. But when you go watch this guy on film, he has a lot of good stuff. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, to all of you out there who have already locked in your brains that it's Bud Dupree, James Harrison, T.J. Watt, Moats, and Chickillo, and that's it, I don't entirely agree with you. Now, if the season started today, I think it's Moats and Chickillo. But when we go through camp, I think if Keon Adams is flashing, I think if he's doing well, I think the Steelers are going to look at it and say, well, Moats, we don't really want to pay you $2.5 million. We need to free up some cap space, and we got this rookie here. And I think there's a real chance you could see him go out the door. I'm just preparing you. I'm going to get so much flack for saying that because everybody loves Moats. I'm just preparing you. That's all I'm doing. Okay, that pretty much wraps it up for the outside linebackers. Let's move to defensive linemen now, get our first 3 locks out of the way. Obviously, Stephon Tuitt, Javon Hargrave, and Cam Hayward. Those are going to be your 3 starters. And really going to be fun to get all these guys back together because, last year, man, our D-line just took a beating. Obviously, Cam Hayward went down. He tore his pectoral muscle, so he had to be placed on season-ending IR. Javon Hargrave, he had a couple of injuries last season. Stephon Tuitt, he had a great year, but good Lord, that guy... We worked the fire out of Stephon Tuitt last season. And this is one of the reasons why a guy like Stephon Tuitt I view as one of the best D-linemen in football. The motor on this guy is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, he's a 3-down player.
Yes. No, he's more like a 4-down player, dude. I mean, this guy played well over 90% of the snaps last season. And one of the big narratives for our D-line last season was, when is Stephon Tuitt going to tear his ACL? When is Stephon Tuitt going to tear his MCL or his Achilles? Because we were working the fire out of him. But anyway, It's going to be fun to get these 3 guys back together. All 3 of those guys are locks. They're going to be your starters. Talking about the depth guys now, we obviously went out and signed Tyson Aluala in free agency this offseason. A lot of people forget that he was a top 10 draft pick back in 2010.
Yeah, that's right.
The Jaguar. Now, and a lot of people thought the Jaguars reached for him, which was kind of a reach.
Yep.
But
right.
He was a top 10 draft pick at the time. He's 30 years old today. I think he's got 17 and a half sacks over the course of his career. I mean, what you're getting in a guy in Tyson Aluala is very, very solid veteran depth.
Yeah, rotational player.
Yeah, and it's a guy we had to have because we lost Ricardo Matthews. Our veteran defensive lineman. He had some injuries last season, and we did not sign him back this season, so he walked. So it was just a nice little supplemental signing, and he's a guy who you hope can give a guy like Stephon Tuitt a breather every now and then.
Yeah.
So I think he's an automatic lock to make the team. Then there's L.T. Walton, who was, Walton, remember, our 6th-round pick back in 2015. Walton is a guy who, going into this season, his stock is way, way up. Made the 53-man roster in 2015, made the 53-man roster last season, but because of all the shakeups we had at D-line last season, with Hargrave going down at one point, with Hayward going down, Ricardo Matthews had an injury last season, because of how desperate we were at D-line, Walton saw quite a few snaps last season, and I thought Walton held his own very, very well. I thought he was very disruptive at times. So that does nothing but help his stock going into this season. And I do think he's an automatic lock to make the team. Now, on on the depth chart, I think the battle, he and Alua are definite locks. It's just going to be, are they going to be the number 4? Which guy's going to be the number 4 guy and which guy's going to be the number 5 guy? I think that's where training camp and preseason will work that out. Now, getting down here to the number 6 spot. This is where I think the competition will come into play. And by the way, the Steelers are most definitely going to keep 6 defensive linemen. I don't see any reason why they wouldn't keep 6. I think that's probably I think that's probably the way it's going to be. The 6 defensive linemen, I think, is going to be a little bit of a war. So you've got Big Dan McCullers, who was our nose tackle we drafted back in 2014. I feel like every football team has a version of Dan McCullers. A guy who you draft or pick up and you think he's going to be amazing.
Right.
You got these lofty plans for him. And then you get him on the field, and it's just absolute flop.
Yeah.
Dan McCullers, he's a nose tackle, and he is 6'7", and he's like 380 pounds. He's a massive individual. And watching Dan McCullers on tape, it's a lot like watching Dwight Howard play basketball. Dwight Howard is a massive human. His arms are bigger than my entire body. But when you watch the guy play, it's like, dude, where's the energy? Where's the fire? You know you're like 10 feet bigger than everybody on that court, right? That's what it's like watching Dan McCullers. You're waiting for the intensity and the fire to kick in, but it just never happens. So McCullers going into this season, I think his stock is down. Last season, Javon Hargrave comes in as a rookie and immediately takes the job from him. Like right off the bat, takes his job. The other thing that threatens Dan McCullers going into this season is Johnny Maxey, undrafted free agent out of Mars Hill. Because of all the shakeups we had at D-line last season, Chris, we actually got really desperate at one point, and we had to reach on our practice squad and pull this kid up from Mars Hill. Which, by the way, Mars Hill, here in our home state.
That's right,
North Carolina. Very small school, but we go on our practice squad and we pull this Johnny Maxey guy up. And he actually started in that big Christmas Day game against the Ravens and the following week against the Browns. I got to tell you, man, for a guy who is very, very inexperienced, came from a small school, held his own very well. I was very impressed with what Johnny Maxey did last season. So, because you got a young guy like Maxey who got the experience he got last season, then you look at Dan McCullers, who has yet to do much of anything. Maxey's a big threat to McCullers. So if McCullers wants to get on this roster and if he wants to stay on this team, he's going to have to ball out. He's going to have a massive training camp and do a lot in the preseason. If he doesn't, I think easily they're going Maxey over McCullers. That's just me. And I think that about wraps it up for me, Chris.
Okay.
My inside linebacker, and D-line discussion. Let's kick it over to you, sir. I'm curious to see what you have to say here.
Well,
because, the inside linebacker situation obviously has been one Skins fans have been complaining about for a while. You guys did take steps to somewhat address that this offseason with Zach Brown. Defensive line, that's another big thing we've been complaining about. You went out and got Jonathan Allen. And then outside linebacker, will Junior Gillette play this year?
Yeah, who knows?
Preston Smith, we want him to get back to form. But I'll kick it over to you. What's going on?
I'll start inside linebacker. The numbers here are going to be very interesting. For Trent Murphy is going to be the linchpin here. Trent Murphy starts this year on the suspended list, so he's going to miss the first 4 games.
Now, what did he do? Was it substance abuse?
Illegal substance, bodybuilding substance or whatever. So I'll get to why he's important in just a minute. But anyway, I think the Redskins, I can't see the Redskins are going to keep 5. I can't see the Redskins are going to keep 5 inside linebackers. I think they're going to keep 4.
Okay.
And I think those 4 will be Zach Brown, Will Compton, Mason Foster, and Martrell Spate are the first 4 that I have.
Okay.
Spate being depth, he got some work last year. He's kind of your Mike linebacker to back up Will Compton. I really see Mason Foster and Zach Brown probably getting the most snaps since they're going to be in nickel a lot.
Okay.
Chris Carter is a guy they signed, and he's the type of guy that the Redskins in the past have kept because he's a special teams demon.
Right.
So out of the gate, he may get a roster spot. He may stick, but I just can't see them. I just can't see room for 5. One of my favorite players they drafted this year is Josh Harvey Clemens. Immediately they said he's going to be nickel, kind of a nickel backer.
Because he was slated in the draft to be a safety / linebacker.
Yeah, but he played a lot in the box and a good tackler, finds the football. I'd like to see the Redskins keep him, but again, it's just hard to see him cracking that 4 and getting a lot of playing time. So I think he's a guy that I definitely hope can get to the practice squad. Maybe injuries completely alter this, but those are my first 4. The outside linebackers, I've got 4 there.
Okay.
Ryan Kerrigan and Preston Smith.
Wait, hold up. Only starters. 4? Only 4 outside linebackers?
For right now, yeah. Well, I think again, this is where the Trent Murphy situation plays big, because Trent Murphy played some on the defensive line last year, and he played outside linebacker. But he's not going to figure into your initial 53 because he's suspended. So the key is, after he comes off suspension, what roster move do they make? Do they keep one fewer safety to get him on? Do they keep, and how does he slate in there? Trent Murphy took advantage last year of the Junior Gillette injury. Because let's face it, Trent Murphy was kind of an afterthought until the injury to Gillette. He shows up last year and comes out of nowhere and has 9 sacks.
Yeah.
And has he had
a very productive
effective season.
Yeah.
So, again, but I think Kerrigan and Preston Smith will be the starters. Ryan Anderson, he's going to work behind Kerrigan, it looks like, the draft pick from Alabama. And obviously, Junior Gillette is going to be heavily used in the nickel situation. So, if he can get to the season healthy.
Hopefully.
So, again,
allegedly.
I don't think there's a lot of mystery there. I think it's pretty cut and dried.
Okay. I guess I was just a little caught off guard when you said 4. I was like, whoa.
Well, again, they've got to do something with Trent Murphy.
Yeah.
But it's going to be interesting because, like I said, I have them keeping 5 safeties and 6
corners.
6 corners. Now, how Fabian Moreau, how his injury progresses, maybe he starts on the PUP and it's not really an issue until the 6th week of the season. Maybe, Trent takes that spot on the roster. But anyway, how the play-in time is going to be interesting because Kerrigan is a beast. He doesn't come off the field.
Mm-hmm.
Preston Smith has largely been a disappointment. There have been flashes out of this guy that make you think he's got it.
Yeah.
And then there are games where he's completely invisible.
Yeah.
So this is the make or break year for him, I think, in Washington. I really, really believe that.
Yeah.
I think he's got to show that he can be consistent. I mean, I'm not saying you expect 2 sacks from him every game, but he's got to be a consistent playmaker. He's got to improve the motor if he's going to entrench himself here.
Yeah.
Junior Gillette, if he comes back anywhere near the player the Saints had when they let him go, he's a terror. He'll crawl to the quarterback if he has to. I mean, this guy's got a lot of moves. He gets low. He bends the corner. He bends the edge, bends the corner. Wow. Did you hear that?
Shame.
He does. I mean, you watch this guy. He's the perfect definition when he's healthy of bending the edge.
Yeah. Now, but do you worry because of the time off he's had?
Listen, yes. I mean, I don't know what to expect out of Junior.
It's a lot like Senquez Golson. We wonder with the foot injury.
You don't know what kind of quickness has been robbed, his speed, the explosiveness. So we'll just see.
Yeah.
But I think those are the 4, and I think Trent Murphy is 5. But somebody's going to have to go for that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Somebody's got to go. But again, I like this linebacker situation. I was a little surprised the Redskins didn't address it in the draft in one way.
Mm-hmm.
But again, if Zach Brown can play the way he played last year for us, we'll be upgraded.
Okay.
It's going to be an upgrade. And like I said, as much as the Redskins play in nickel, he and Mason Foster could definitely end up being the 2 guys that get the biggest snap, even though Will Compton may be listed as the starter. So
if it came down to it, would you rather have Compton or Foster?
Foster.
Interesting. Okay.
My problem with Will Compton is this. It's not effort. It's not attitude. This guy's got everything you want, but he is not good in coverage. He gets washed out a lot against the run. Now, if he diagnoses and gets into his run fit correctly, he can be an effective tackler, short area guy. I just feel like this has become such a range-oriented game now. Yeah. He is not a sideline-to-sideline guy like we used to have in London Fletcher.
But plus, I feel like he had a very underwhelming season last year.
I
felt
too.
like going into the season, I even remember the shows we had last year. Going in, the early shows before the season, you were like, Will Compton. And then the season came, and I feel like there was just kind of like...
Yeah, it was very underwhelming.
Yeah.
Very disappointing. Mason Foster, I think, is better in coverage.
Now, let's be honest. Foster was underwhelming as well.
Well,
in a lot of ways.
Foster had... You go back and watch some of the games. His last game against the Giants...
Oh, was that the game where he had something like 300 tackles in one game?
Listen, if we could bottle that up. But I think Mason Foster is kind of an underappreciated player. I think he's a heads-up football player.
Okay.
Be interested to see how he does in this new defense. But again, I think that's the linebacker situation. Defensive line, I've got him keeping 6, and it's sort of like the Pittsburgh Steelers situation. It really comes down to that final spot.
Let's go through who we have. We got Jonathan Allen.
We have Jonathan Allen, Stacy McGee, and Terrell McClain, our 2 free agent signings.
Okay.
They re-up Ziggy Hood. And Ziggy Hood was a solid rotational player last year.
Yeah, but is that the guy not disappointing or what?
Well,
there's so much potential and buzz around that guy, man. I mean, that was a narrative when he was on Pittsburgh. We were just waiting for that guy to explode, and we were just like...
I don't think he's ever going to be what people hoped he would be.
No, I mean, obviously
But what
not.
he is a good rotational player.
Oh, sure.
I don't have a problem with him being one of the 6 in-and-out guys. Don't have a problem at all.
Yeah.
And we're not expecting him. This is the nice thing about finally getting a guy like Jonathan Allen. We don't have to rely on a guy like Ziggy Hood to be the main guy on the defensive line.
Absolutely.
And for years, we've sort of pieced this thing together and hoping a guy can come in and have this monster year or recapture something of his past. And now I finally feel like we've got something with Jonathan Allen that we can build on so that a guy like Ziggy Hood can be appreciated for what he is, and that's a good rotational player.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that's 4. 5th guy, Anthony Lanier is going to make this football team. I think the Doug Williams really, really was high on him last year. He's raw. He played small school college football, so he had a learning curve. But I feel like most people around Redskin Park feel like this guy can be a difference maker at some point in his career. So I'll be shocked if he's not one of the 5. Now, it comes down to number 6. And for years, what have we said? Or really the last 3 years, what if you're a Redskin fan, what's the big question? Who's nose tackle? Who are we gonna have on the nose? And Joe Barry's answer to that was always, well, we're in nickel 65 to 70% of the time. You don't really need a nose tackle. But there were times last year, we could have used a nose tackle.
Yeah.
So the Redskins have Phil Taylor, Joey Mbu, and they also have Piskin. I think it's Andre Piskin from Texas A&M. I think that's his name. He was signed as a college free agent. One of those 3 guys, I think, will make it. And right now, most of the guys that cover it feel like Phil Taylor will be the guy. And that's kind of exciting. If Phil Taylor can get rid of the injury bug, this guy can play. And he's experienced. Now, again, the question becomes, if you're only going to keep 6, and you're only going to... that's kind of raw. That's kind of a bare bones number. This guy may have to play a little bit more than 10 or 12.
Yeah.
Right. So the durability of Phil Taylor could become an issue. But again, I do think the Redskins need to keep some beef in there. Yeah. I do. There were times last year where they just got overmatched in short yardage situations, and is a nose tackle going to fix all of that? No. But there were some situations where you felt like it would have been nice to have somebody that's
Every
taking
now
up
and
space.
then, just
Taking up space. Now, I understand that this means that Matt Ioannidis doesn't make my team. So, yeah, that's what it means. Ioannidis doesn't make my team.
Ooh.
But maybe he does. Maybe he does. It just depends.
But weren't you a fan of him, though?
Well, I never really understood where he was going to fit.
No,
Because he was another one of these guys who's right around 300 pounds, and they wanted to make him play on the nose, but he had versatility. He could play on the edge, or he could play inside when they went four-man. I just felt bad for him because I never felt like he found a position to just get in and play.
Yeah.
So what I'm hoping with Greg Minuski's defense is there's a little more definition. I can't remember if Ioannidis is still, if somebody knows if Ioannidis still has some eligibility for the practice squad, please come at me with that, because I just can't remember if he does. I know he was active some last year, but I don't know if he went over the limit to be considered eligible for the practice squad. If that's the case, I'd love for him to stay.
Sure.
Definitely would love for him to stay. But I think that's the defensive line pretty cut and dried.
Okay.
Now, obviously, you and I've talked about it, injuries can alter that in a heartbeat.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Can completely change the makeup. But I think it's a pretty cut and dried thing. But, again, Trent Murphy, when he comes off, he's going to take somebody's spot. And it'll be interesting to see what kind of roster shuffling goes on to
really,
make room for him.
Really what we're trying to figure out is Murphy going to play outside linebacker or end? Defensive end?
I think he's going to play both.
Okay.
I think he's going to play both. I think he'll see time.
So he's one of those
both.
guys that could really mess up a roster spot. I mean, it just sounds like he's one of those dudes who, somebody's gonna get burned because of this.
Well,
guy.
it's interesting. I've since the draft, I kind of wondered. They went out and got Ryan Anderson, and I thought, okay.
Which very quickly, do you think he starts day one?
No. Ryan Anderson's back up.
Okay,
he's back up. Like I said, he got him working on the right side under Kerrigan, which that's probably the best place for him.
Yeah.
But I think the deal is this. This is Preston Smith, and we talked about him. This is Preston Smith's show me year. Mm-hmm. So if Preston Smith struggles, Junior Gallette's only on a 1-year deal. So if he tanks, it's not that big a deal. Or if he explodes and has a massive year, they're still covered. I think Ryan Anderson gives them some leeway there. Yeah. But again, the Trent Murphy situation when he comes off is going to be very interesting.
Okay.
Because he's going to be on the roster. If healthy, and that means somebody won't be.
Right.
So I'm really interested to see how that plays out. But ultimately, that's it for me.
Sounds interesting. All right. Well, I think that about wraps it up. That's everybody on defense.
Yeah.
We
covered the defense.
We did defensive backs. We did linebackers. We did linemen. So all we have to do next is move to the offensive side of the football, and we'll get to that next week. Very quickly before we start wrapping up here, I had a couple people ask me, "Hey, you gonna address the Artie Burns situation?" The answer is really no. Obviously, referring to Artie Burns, he did get arrested. I think it's about a week ago, maybe a little over a week ago. Got pulled over in Miami. He was driving with an expired license, also had expired tags. I just don't think there's anything to talk about here. Some people wanted to absolutely put him on a stick and skewer him. And guys, I got to be honest, when I was scrolling through my phone and I saw Artie Burns arrested, and then I read what it was, I was fine. I mean, seeing Artie Burns arrested, then clicking on that link, I was waiting to see domestic violence. Right. I was waiting to see substance abuse. I was waiting to see assault. I mean, I was waiting to see something terrible, absolutely awful. And then to see, he just has an expired license. It was like, that's it? That's all we have?
Yep.
So I don't really think there's much of a narrative here. Now, he does have, and this is something that he's got to grow up a little bit. He has over $1,000 in unpaid parking tickets. Or unpaid.
You got to get that taken care of.
Yeah, come on, man. I mean, you're not making Antonio Brown money as a second-year player, but, dude, you're making a lot of money even as a second-year guy. Come on, man. Take care of that. One of the other things that bothered me is one of the violations was going 130 miles an hour, and he got stopped for it. Come on, dude. I mean, it sounds like Artie Burns is a very young man who got some growing up to do.
Yeah.
Outside of that, I don't feel the need to take this situation and pick it apart and let's become psychologists and talk about Artie Burns. Like, I don't feel the need to do that. What does this mean for him going into the season? I don't believe this violation falls under the league's.
No, it's not going to affect that at all.
No. So he's not going to miss any playing time. There will be no suspensions. Maybe the Steelers will figure out their own little way to punish him, but he's not going to miss any playing time. So not really much of a narrative there. Chris, I think that's all I got, man.
Yep, that's all I got.
Okay, guys, you can follow us on Twitter. I am at P_Garrison. Chris is at CGLSKSC. You can follow the show at Steelskin Show. If you're listening to the show on iTunes, make sure you please rate the show. Make sure you write us a review. And most importantly, please subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, you know the deal. Please subscribe to the channel, comment below, join the conversation, tell your friends, tell your family, and all that great stuff. Do have some stuff I'm working on. Not really ready to talk about it just yet, but I am working on some ways that you guys can further support the show and further help us out. I'm working on that. Should be able to talk about it soon, maybe in the next couple weeks. But anyway, more on that when we get to it. Chris, I don't want to talk anymore, man. I think I'm done.
Okay.
Okay, you?
Yeah, I'm done.
You want to sing a song for me?
No.
Will you hold me?
How about no?
You sure?
Play that song, the one that makes... No, we're done.
Okay. All right, guys. We will see you next week. Until then, good night.